Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 3 of the Puhr Report. Thanks for listening, whether it's on journeyintocomics.com or our Patreon. I'm happy you're here. We have a ton of news to get through today and a few things I have to tell you about that I saw on TV. All this and more on this week's The Puhr Report. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the third episode of the Puhr Report. I am always your host, Andrew Puhr, and I want to thank you for listening. Now, there's a lot of news to get to this week, so I will get to that shortly, but there's a few things I saw on TV recently that I want to talk about. So the first thing was I recently finished the season 4 finale of Game of Thrones. Now, for most of you, you're like, we just watched the season 7 finale. What are you doing? Why are you talking to us about season 4? Well, I'm one of those small margin of people who is watching a show in order only with their partner. So we both read the books first. We read all of the books, finished everything that was up last summer, and then started watching the show. And since we don't live together, we don't get to watch the show regularly. So we watch it basically once a week. So we get through 1 or 2 episodes a week. So that's how we've gotten to season 4. And season 4 finale, if any of you remember, is when Tyrion escapes from King's Landing. So he goes to that secret passageway and he sees Shay and he freaks out and kills her even though he doesn't want to, but she betrayed him on the stands and then betrayed him by sleeping with his father. Then he goes to the bathroom with a crossbow and shoots his father while he's taking a crap. In the nicest way possible. And then he kind of sets off for the free cities, or sets off away from King's Landing with Varys. We also find Brienne of Tarth and the Hound fight it out very well. It was a very brutal fight to watch, very well choreographed. And then we get to see, as far as we know, him dying on that cliff face, and then Arya leaving and using her coin to get passage to the free cities where she'll train even more, and we'll see what happens to her. So that's kind of where I am now with season 4, so that's exciting. I'm happy to start season 5 and hopefully get all caught up in time for season 8, which I guess is like over a year away. I think it's 2019 is when they're coming back. So I guess I'm about a year and a half now. So I guess I don't have to wait nearly as long as some of you people, because by the time I get caught up, there'll hopefully be a year or less left. So that's exciting. Another thing I watched last night was the movie 400 Days. Now, 400 Days caught my eye because it starred Dane Cook, who we really haven't seen much from in a while. I remember him from the comedies like Employee of the Month and Good Luck Chuck. But he really hasn't been doing too much lately, so I was kind of curious. And also noticed about the cast is that it also starred Katie Lotz and Brandon Routh, both who star on Legends of Tomorrow, and they play a couple in that one, in this movie, which is kind of interesting. Well, a divorced couple, but still they were together. So the plot of this movie, I think, is they were to test out large, long-distance interstellar space. So they're kind of trapped in a space for 400 days. So that's kind of the plot of it. That's how long their mission is. So they're deep underground to kind of do this long-term simulation. So it's Dane Cook, Katie Lotz, and Brandon Routh, and I believe Ben Feldman. I may be wrong. I'll have to look later. He was on Mad Men as I can't remember his name now either. So kind of 2 for 2 on that. So the movie starts out really interesting because it just looks like a normal mission. He said the person who's running the operation says he's going to throw tricks at them to see if they can handle this 400-day-long mission without any other physical contact besides the 4 people on the team. So they get in there, hunker down, everything seems normal, and then there's kind of it almost seems like a large earthquake, things shaking, and then they don't have communication to the command center anymore. And they start kind of seeing things. We're not sure if it's hallucinations or if something else is going on. It kind of gave me a feel of 10 Cloverfield Lane for those who've seen that movie. So all of a sudden they kind of freak out. They have a few odd moments. Uh, One of the weird ones was Dane Cook walks to a room and then sees this weird, deformed person, and then he thinks it's a hallucination that turned out to be an actual guy, and he's must have gotten through some vent system somewhere. So they decided to leave, and there's this whole thing about, is this all a simulation? Is it supposed to just to test them, or if this is a real thing going on? So they run along to try and figure it out. So they kind of go out of the hatch at the top and see that the world is now this gray, desolate wasteland, and so they have their suits on. They go kind of exploring and stumble upon a diner, and who would be sweeping the front steps of that diner would be Tom Cavanaugh, which you may know from the TV show on CW, The Flash. So there's a little mini CW reunion happening that happens to feature Dane Cook. So very interesting movie. It looks like, from what I could gather from the movie, is that while they were on this mission, an asteroid may have struck Earth. Kind of people died. People got infected by things that are inside the asteroid, and that those who survive are kind of crazy. And it's really weird. I'll say the details for those of you who want to actually watch the movie. But basically, it ends with Tom Cavanaugh's character following them back into their ship simulation, where there's food and shelter and water and stuff that could last a very long time. And looks like he wants to kill the main characters. Dane Cook and Ben Feldman, I think his name was, are both missing. They both have disappeared from some point. So it's just Katie Lotz and Brandon Routh, and looks like he's about to kill one of them, and then Katie Lotz had stabbed him in the back, and he dies. And then this 400 days counter hits, and the simulation's over supposedly, and they just stare off into the whiteness, and then that's it. So it was a weird movie. It was a sci-fi original film. It never went to theaters, so it's a very low-budget production. But it caught my eye at Family Video for like $2, so I bought it just like, oh, this might be interesting, because it's about the same cost to rent movies these days. And I really love Family Video. They always have a great selection, and they're one of the last remaining places to actually rent videos in a store where you can actually talk to people. So if you have a Family Video in your neighborhood, please support it. They're not going to be around forever. I have a feeling with the wave of things going to streaming services or to just renting movies on Netflix or Amazon or iTunes, however you get your movies, or illegally downloading for those of you who kind of go that route. But I encourage you to visit the stores. Sometimes they're the first exposure people have to actually renting movies, for people who don't have cable or don't have a streaming service or don't have the money for that. They can fork over a few bucks every so often to rent a movie. The other thing I just watched today, earlier before I recorded this, was the season premiere of American Horror Story. Now, American Horror Story I've watched regularly as it aired since Season 2. Season 1, I think I caught up on Netflix. Now, this season, they tease a lot that had to do with the recent presidential election. And there's also going to be clowns involved. And then they announced during San Diego Comic-Con that the title was American Horror Story Cult. And they released like the intro a little bit later, which showed some clowns and creepy people wearing Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton masks, and it's very American Horror Story, very unusual and uneasy. I'm going to dive into a kind of a spoilery review of the episode. So it starts off right when the election results come in. You see Sarah Paulson's character reacting to the news in a very Sarah Paulson way. She kind of screams and cries and freaks out. And if you've seen Sarah Paulson in the other American Horror Story shows, you see that she does that a lot, and it gets kind of annoying because she does it all throughout the episode, because she plays a very liberal woman who just can't handle the election results. And you also see that she has some phobias that she sees a psychiatrist for, that include a fear of clowns, fear of enclosed spaces like claustrophobia, and also a fear of holes, which is like holes in like coral or food or like a honeycomb. Any of those holes make her uneasy. I haven't heard of that phobia before. Someone else said that they were familiar with that. So that's kind of how that sets up. And she's married to Alison Pill, who you may know from the HBO show The Newsroom. And they have a son, and they're all handling it in their own way. And then on the flip side of this, there's Evan Peters, who is a returning character, playing this blue-haired, kind of anarchist, very pro-fear, pro-Trump in his message and the campaign. And he has a weird reaction to Trump getting elected. He humps the TV screen, and then he takes Cheetos, blends them in a blender, and then covers his face and hands and pretends to be Trump. And then, yeah, so it's a really weird first few minutes, and then it kind of plays up the whole Sarah Paulson's character's fear of clowns. She's at the grocery store and then sees two clowns having sex over a fruit produce stand. And then you see her freak out, and she throws bottles of wine at them, and then she kind of runs off, and there's a few more clowns, and no one's... when she gets back home, she calls the cops, and they figure it all out, and apparently there's no clowns on the screen, so it's the whole, is it in her head, or is it not? And then they show you like 4 or 5 clowns involved in this situation, which is really messed up, and then you see it happen later at the restaurant that they own together, Alison Pill and Sarah Paulson's characters. And so you see a clown again there, masturbating into a soup dish. A lot of sexual grotesqueness, which is very weird, especially in people in clown makeup or in clown masks. Then it kind of jumps into the couple lives across the street, an Asian family who was there with them during the election results. They're friends of theirs, were, I think, voted for Hillary, and you see that the night the boy looks out the window and sees a ice cream truck pull up, and the same clowns that were in the grocery store come out and see the boy in the window and look at him, and then he runs off, and then he looks back later and sees them kind of go inside the neighbor's house, and then it kind of cuts forward, and then you see that that couple was murdered, and then the boy explains that him and the babysitter went across the street when they noticed it, and then see those same clowns murdering that Asian family. And so you're trying to kind of figure out, I think, if these clowns are real or if they're a figment of imagination that both Sarah Paulson's character and her son both share, or what that story is. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out from week to week. The seasons have kind of been hit or miss. I know last season wasn't my favorite. It kind of played it out like one of those Investigation Discovery or like one of those Investigation Discovery shows, like those haunting shows. So it kind of played out like that, and it was in Roanoke at this house, and it's a whole nother topic I really won't get into right now, but it didn't turn me off from watching any more episodes. It's not my favorite premiere. You really can't compare what the American Horror Story as an anthology show does now to what the first couple seasons were. But they've course corrected a lot in the past, and I know how Tell was good. So I'm going to see how it goes from week to week. That's one of the shows I'll keep up with, and that's kind of it for my kind of TV talk. And the movie that was a sci-fi show that I bought as DVD, so it's a little bit of TV talk. And we're also getting into kind of the heyday of TV shows, which is fall TV premieres. And I know I have a sheet right next to my couch that has a list of when all of these shows are set to premiere, starting with like this week with the American Horror Story and a couple other shows, and then Thursday Night Football and all that on there, all the way to October when we get to the CW shows coming back. So I kind of have it, all their times listed, the channels they're on, and they're all highlighted for the ones I want to keep up with, because there's a few returning shows I want to watch, and then a handful of new shows that sound interesting enough to get picked up. So I think as I'm doing these shows, I will probably do a quick recap or a short review, probably spoiler-free for those of you who are interested in watching those shows. At least till we get into like the CW shows, which I'm sure you're going to hear talked about on other podcasts with Nate or myself or Blaine, so I would keep an eye out for that, so I think that'll be good. Those are the big things I want to talk in TV. and I have a lot of news to talk about, so I'm going to dive right into that after a brief commercial break.
Hey guys,
Veronica,
Andrew,
and Nate here. We are
Foodies Watching Movies.
A podcast dedicated to
Awesome movies.
Great food.
and that's about it.
Check us out on the JIC network at www.journeyintocomics.com.
Maybe throw some money over to our Patreon.
So we can eat this week.
And now, your feature presentation.
Welcome back to the Puhr Report. Now, I'm going to jump right in with some of the news that happened while I was away. Now, the two big things, and I mean big things, happened in the last couple weeks, and that was Hurricane Harvey and Hurricane Irma. Those two large hurricanes are hit the U.S. recently. Hurricane Harvey hit Texas last week, and Hurricane Irma is hitting Florida, I think, sometime tomorrow. It's kind of working its way up. And there's a lot to talk about with that. I know the big thing that I kind of shared on my Facebook feed was for Hurricane Harvey, was about Joel Osteen and his church. Now, Joel Osteen, for those who don't know, is a preacher at this mega church. He's a mega evangelist, big televangelist person. So, there was reports that he has this giant church, I think used to be one of, I think, a basketball team's arena. It was converted into a church that holds a rather large amount of people, and there was issues with they're not being used as a shelter, and you think a place that big would be able to hold a ton of people. And the reports that he wasn't there, the place was closed up. They sent out on their social media that they're, due to flood damages, don't come here, the roads are impassable, and then there were pictures posted of roads being clear outside, that the only water damages appear to be in the parking lot, and the roads in front, and the roads decided they were wet, but they weren't flooded. So that put Joel Osteen in hot water, and it was shared heavily on social media, and like a lot of articles that people didn't really have all the facts, and I'm not saying that I do, but I kind of did some digging, and maybe the video showing the guy walking up to closed doors was a side door, it was the main entrance, maybe there were people at the main entrance. Either way, what ended up happening is Joel Osteen, after all the social media backlash, decided to make a public statement. They started taking in evacuees to stay kind of in the upstairs area. They put up beds, and they had food and warm clothes and all that stuff. So they kind of made up for it, but it seemed like at that point it was a little bit too little too late, and almost because they kind of egged you on to. So there was issues with that, and he made a statement which he said, we would have been a shelter if they would have asked us to, which is kind of weird in that situation. I think a church would willingly open their doors whenever they needed to help those of the city that's done so well for them. So that was one of the big things that happened while we were away. And then he went on Sunday and had a sermon that talked about how people shouldn't have a victim mentality, that things are done like this to test us, and don't listen to what people say. And it was very trying to make up for what had happened, and trying to people to forget what happened the week before, now that everything was kind of settling back, and try and get things on track. I don't know if his damage is been affected by this. Sorry, my cat decided now is the time to attack me. So, Daisy, you're listening to this podcast right now? Yeah, go play. So, yeah, that was my cat. Thank you for interrupting my show by attacking me. So, back to Joel Osteen. So, it's kind of one of those things that you've seen the pictures, you've seen his giant mansion he has in Houston, has the pools and all the large properties. So it's kind of like you can't preach all of this favor to be nice to your fellow man and then have this happen and not lead as an example, only lead when things start looking bad in your favor, or looking bad towards you, and getting a negative feedback on social media and all that. So that's kind of where that happened. A lot of other hurricane news, and I know for Hurricane Irma, which is kind of already went through a lot of the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, that's rolling out Florida. It actually closed my company's corporate office, which is in Fort Lauderdale. So they're both closed up tonight. They'll be closed up tomorrow through Monday, just to kind of give those people a chance to deal with their own properties at home and be prepared with their family and all that. So they just don't want to worry about work. So got the email about make sure all the electronics are up. So they could get hit. We'll just have to see kind of how that makes landfall. It's definitely one of the largest hurricanes to hit that area, and we've had to have these two massive events happen this close together. It's kind of a weird thing at this time, and I don't know, people are comparing it to almost like a biblical event, comparing that. Also, there's like a wildfire in Washington or Northern California, so a lot of stuff going on, but just got to be hopeful that things are going to work out and that all the emergency service personnel are in place to help make this as minimal with everyone getting to safety that they need to. So my heart goes out to everyone who's either suffered through Hurricane Harvey, is dealing with a wildfire, or is preparing to see what happens with Hurricane Irma as it rolls up Florida and into some of the southern eastern states. So yeah, if any of my listeners are over there, my heart goes out to you, and hopefully this blows over without too much issue for you. Something else that happened while I was away is that Trump decided to rescind the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, a program which shields young immigrants brought to the U.S. illegally by their parents from deportation. The president is phasing out this program over 6 months, allowing time for Congress to act. And I have the statement, the release from the White House, and I'm just going to read that for you now. This is a statement from President Trump on September 5th. He says, "As president, my highest duty is to defend the American people and the Constitution of the United States of America. At the same time, I do not favor punishing children, most of whom are now adults, for the actions of their parents. But we must also recognize that we are a nation of opportunity because we are a nation of laws. The legislative branch, not the executive branch, writes these laws. This is the bedrock of our constitutional system, which I took a solemn oath to preserve, protect, and defend. In June of 2012, President Obama bypassed Congress to give work permits, Social Security numbers, and federal benefits to approximately 800,000 illegal immigrants currently living between the ages of 15 and 36. The typical recipient of this executive amnesty, known as DACA, are in their 20s. Legislation offering these same benefits has been introduced in Congress on numerous occasions and rejected each time. In referencing the idea of creating new immigration rules, unilaterally, President Obama admitted that I can't just do these things by myself, and yet that is exactly what he did, making an end run around Congress and violating the core tenets that sustain our republic. Officials from 10 states are suing over the program, requiring my administration to make a decision regarding its legality. The Attorney General of the United States of America, the Attorney Generals of many states, and virtually all other top legal experts have advised that this program is unlawful and unconstitutional and cannot be successfully defended in court. There can be no path to principled immigration reform if the executive branch is able to rewrite or nullify federal laws at will. The temporary implementation of DACA by the Obama administration, after Congress repeatedly rejected this amnesty-first approach, also helped spur a humanitarian crisis, the massive surge of unaccompanied minors from Central America, including, in some cases, young people who would become members of violent gangs throughout our country, such as MS-13. Only by the reliable enforcement of immigration laws could we produce safe communities, a robust middle class, and economic fairness for all Americans. Therefore, it is the best interest of our country, and in keeping with the obligations of my office, the Department of Homeland Security will begin an orderly transition to wind down of DACA, one that provides minimum disruption. While new applications for work permits will not be accepted, all existing work permits will be honored until their date of expiration, up to 2 years from today. Furthermore, applications already in the pipeline will be processed, as will renewal applications for those facing near-term expiration. This is a gradual process, not a sudden phase-out. Permits will not begin to expire for another 6 months and will remain active for up to 24 months. Thus, in effect, I am not going to just cut DACA off, but rather provide a window of opportunity for Congress to finally act. Our enforcement priorities remain unchanged. We are focused on criminals, security threats, recent border crossers, visa overstays, and repeat violators. I have advised the Department of Homeland Security that DACA recipients are not enforcement priorities unless they are criminals, are involved in criminal activity, or are members of a gang. The decades-long failure of Washington, D.C. to enforce federal immigration law has had both predictable and tragic consequences. Lower wages on local schools and hospitals, the illicit entry of dangerous drugs and criminal cartels, and many billions of dollars of years in costs paid for by U.S. taxpayers. Yet few in Washington express any compassion for the millions of Americans victimized by this unfair system. Before we ask what is fair to illegal immigrants, we must ask what is fair to American families, student taxpayers, and job seekers. Congress now has the opportunity to advance responsible immigration reform that puts American jobs and American security first. We are facing the symptom of a larger problem, illegal immigration, along with many other chronic immigration problems Washington has left unsolved. We must reform our green card system, which now favors low-skilled immigration and puts immense strain on U.S. taxpayers. We must base future immigration on merit. We want those coming into the country to be able to support themselves financially, to contribute to our economy, and to love our country and the values it stands for. Under a merit-based system, citizenship will enjoy higher employment, rising wages, and a stronger middle class. Senators Tom Cotton and David Perdue have introduced the RAISE Act, which would establish the merit-based system and produce lasting gains for the American people. I look forward to working with Republicans and Democrats in Congress to finally address all of these issues in a manner that puts the hardworking citizens of our country first. As I've said before, we will resolve the DACA issue with heart and compassion, but through the lawful democratic process, while at the same time ensuring that any immigration reform we adopt provides enduring benefits for the American citizen we are elected to serve. We must also have heart and compassion for unemployed, struggling, and forgotten Americans. Above all else, we must remember that young Americans have dreams too. Being in government means setting priorities. Our first and highest priority in advancing immigration reform must be to improve jobs, wages, and security for American workers and their families. It is now time for Congress to act. Sorry for that large mouthful of text. That is definitely a long speech, and it does make it sound like a good thing. He does definitely highlight it. Also sounds very un-Trump in the language, the flow, so I'm assuming it was drafted by a speechwriter, at the White House to release that statement, like all presidents do, but it definitely doesn't have the usual Trump feel, and I'm sure there would be a lot more words involved, and a lot more interesting language choices. This program to me seems like it's something that if you're brought here as a child, really without a say in the matter, this is the only home you know that you should be able to stay. I think if you're a functioning member of society and doing work and living on your own, going to school, whatever you're doing here, if you're in the process of doing that, great. If you're not doing it, that's when it gets complicated. If you're kind of sponging off the Social Security system and that, but I don't think that's the case for a lot of these people. A lot of people that are around my age or functional member of society, we're a generation of people who are working. So I think this seems like overkill and something to try and get Trump some more information, some more out, and this is kind of something to throw off the tracks of the issues they've had with in the past with the healthcare bill, with the wall funding, with everything else that Trump is trying to do, and this is something else that I think he's trying to get under because it's something that seems minimally evasive for the majority of people who had voted for him. So that's kind of where things get complicated. I definitely don't agree. I think DACA should remain until everything settles and they're able to do something differently if that's the direction we want to go. If it is better to deport them, then I would definitely be appalled, but we'll kind of see what Trump's able to get across. I know there's been a lot of people who've come out against it. Obviously, a majority of Democrats have come out, as well as Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, and other Republicans have come out against this direction that he is choosing to go. So that's one of the big things that happened this week, and I know it's still in development. This was just Tuesday, just a couple days ago, so we'll have to see what comes forward. I know there was many articles I was reading about this, so I think when we pick up next episode, there'll be more developed on this, and I know it's a 6 months, so it's going to be a slow process, but I remember when he was preventing people from coming in right after he got elected and had people stopped in airports and had protesting. It was just a mess, and I think this one he's trying to do slower and steadier, and I don't think it's going to work out, and I hope it doesn't. So That's another thing that's good in Trump news. And one thing you'll know from always listening to the show is there's always going to be a nice chunk of Trump news. And something else that I noticed that I actually saw today in an article that it's Trump related, it's not really newsworthy. I just thought it was interesting, and I think it's worth bringing up here because it didn't bother me as much as I think it bothered a lot of people, and I think it's due to some connotation changes regarding it. It came out today during one of Trump's speeches, either today or yesterday. I'm not exactly sure, and by the time you're listening to this, it'll have been in the past. But it came out that Ivanka Trump, Trump's daughter, who has a White House position, works in the White House, all that, calls her father daddy. Now, that's kind of weird for a 35-year-old woman to call her father daddy. She's also probably, but of the mind that she's his little girl. She probably still has that mindset. She might not say it all the time. It might just come up occasionally. It's kind of weird, but I think a lot of it has to do with people now use daddy as some women call their significant other or their person they're dating or hooking up with. And I think that's what put a bad taste in people's mouths. I don't think it's particularly a bad thing. It's a little uncomfortable, and I don't think you should use it like my parents or mom and dad. For them as my mother, my father. That I may have said that when I was very little, but that was never in my vocabulary. I think it's more common for when they're very little, probably up to maybe grade school, a couple years into grade school, and then that should stop. So I think it's weird. I think people kind of blew that one up out of proportion just for having something to complain about. I think there's plenty more to complain about now. And this is kind of just a reaching article that's just a little uncomfortable. And I think that's it. I had a handful of other articles I wanted to discuss about Trump, but I think that's enough Trump talk for this week. One thing I will say that I noticed is that Trump is now working with some Democratic leaders from the Democratic Party to help get over this the debt ceiling and kind of work that out. And I think there's something about this dream bill which may get implemented, which I don't know if it's related to this DACA or not. I haven't really done enough research to do it. I saw that just before I started pulling up the articles I was going to talk about today. But I think that'll close out my Trump Talk segment. So with that, I'm going to kind of go into something I think that you'll find a little bit more enjoyable, which is funner news. And one thing I noticed is that they found a new color of chocolate. After 80 years, there's a new color palette of chocolate, which is ruby. So I think the people who listen to us on Foodies, which we just recorded a show over the weekend, which was great, and I think we're definitely going in a different direction. So I think those of you who listen to a lot of shows on our network will enjoy this little bit of information. So there's a new color, which is ruby, which is a reddish color, berry flavored chocolate, which looks pinkish, and I'm sure it's going to get used a lot in weddings and other bits. Sorry, my cat decided that recording this episode was also an invitation for her to attack me again. So that's... Dang it, Daisy, stop biting. Ow. So I guess my co-host for this week's episode is going to be Daisy, my cat, who is 1.5 and is a handful. Ow! Sorry. Ow, she is really not letting go. So I guess I'm going to jump right into entertainment news. And a lot of big things happen in entertainment news this week. One of the big things that I believe I shared on our Facebook was about a new Joker origin movie. It drew headlines when it said Martin Scorsese and Todd Phillips are going to be making a Joker origin film. A film that will be set outside of the current DCEU and will exist in its own standalone state. So I found that was kind of interesting, is that they're doing a Joker origin film, which Joker infamously has no set origin. His, how he came to existence is a mystery. They've kind of touched on it they even touched on it in the movie The Dark Knight, where the Joker gives 3 or 4 different origins of how he got his scars. So that's kind of always been a mystery, and that's something that Batman in their run-ins have never really figured out. So the fact they're doing a Joker, and I guess they also did it in the '89 Batman, which showed kind of this gang boss Jack Napier getting injured, falling into a vat of chemicals, and then becoming the Joker. And then Suicide Squad used it to see how they kind of redo that for the Harley Quinn character, who is kind of a female Joker-esque character, which you'll know from the comics and from the movies, and there's going to be more Joker coming up. But this is kind of interesting that there's a Joker that exists in the DC EU played by Jared Leto, who had a brief moment within the Suicide Squad movie. And then you have this other Joker movie, which Scorsese and Todd Phillips are doing, which maybe set in the 80s, maybe New York-esque, maybe classic Scorsese doing a comic book interpretation of the Joker's origin, which is all great, and it sounds like it'll be interesting, but this is all very much rumored. There's been no confirmations, no directors. The director hasn't signed on, which is Todd Phillips. Scorsese still hasn't been signed on. I know there were talks that the hope was, with bringing Scorsese on, they have a shot of getting Leonardo DiCaprio, a longtime collaborator and very well-known actor, to play the Joker, which would be interesting given the age that Leonardo DiCaprio is now. I know he's in his... Is he in his 40s yet? I'm not quite sure. He's either in his late 30s or early 40s. He's getting up there, so him playing an origin character for opposite an established Joker, played by Jared Leto, who is probably a good 6 or so years younger than him. I'd have to actually look at both their ages to know for sure, but he definitely looks a bit younger than Leonardo DiCaprio. And I know when this announcement broke, it was also reported that Jared Leto was very unhappy of this second Joker coming into existence in the cinematic universe and worried about the confusion. And I know it was an issue brought up to his representation, and other companies have been looking to kind of poach him. So it'll be kind of interesting to see how this shakes out. But WB within the same week announced that the Suicide Squad 2 had a director, that they were going to do a Joker and Harley Quinn spinoff that's not Gotham City Sirens, which was previously announced, and it's not Suicide Squad 2. So I think they're trying to make Jared Leto happy, to keep him around, let him know that he is the Joker for the DCEU, and even if there's another Joker, that doesn't change how they feel about you, which kind of sounds like what you do to keep someone around, even though you're looking at someone else. So we'll have to see what develops. I know there's been a lot of shaky ground with the DC Entertainment Universe, extended universe. So we'll have to see what comes of that, and I'm sure as we get into the fall and as Justice League gets closer and closer, I'm sure WWE is going to want to drop more tidbits of what they're going to do. So I'm personally excited for a standalone Joker film that involves Todd Phillips and Martin Scorsese. Todd Phillips, who's famously done the Hangover films, and Scorsese, who's had a long run of movies that I'm not going to name here, but I know they talked about it being Taxi Driver-esque, which I think is interesting if they can pull it off right. Like I said before, the Suicide Squad 2 has found a director. So I have a lot of articles pulled up here. I'm trying to find the right one. It's a name that I didn't recognize right away, so I may have to come back to it. Why come back to that? Another big directing tidbit was that the director of Star Wars Episode 9, which is not the forthcoming Star Wars movie, or the Han Solo movie, which also lost both its directors earlier this summer. It's the director who directed Jurassic World, which is Colin Trevorrow. They released a statement. I'm trying to do this way. I think going forward, my episodes are going to have printed news articles, so I don't have to wait for my internet, which seems to not like that, have all these tabs open with articles to kind of dig into it. So we're just going to wait a minute here as I kind of go through this. Another thing I can go over while I'm waiting for my page to load is that it was reported that this summer's box office hit an $11 year record low that hasn't been met in 11 years. So I know there wasn't a lot of movies that really jumped out. I know there was the Spider-Man movie came out this year and Wonder Woman came out this summer, but the summer box office wasn't particularly exciting this year. I know I only saw, I think, 4 or 5 movies, and some of the people I talked to have seen 2 to 3, some just 1. So I don't know if this is a sign of just an off year, or if this is just showing a sign that people are no longer going to the theaters to see their movies, or they don't have the money for it, or there's so many other options, so much great TV that's been coming out recently, or people just getting the movies illegally, or what if there's a root cause to this problem, or if it's just the rise in ticket prices that have kind of kept people from seeing multiple movies that have caused this slump. But I'm always going to go to the movies. I love movies. If anyone hears me on the Foodies podcast or has been in my place and seen my collection of 500 some odd movies and DVDs and Blu-ray, they'll know that I'm a big fan. I'm always going to see a movie in the theater. I follow the Best Picture of the Academy Awards when they come out, and the Golden Globes and all those award shows that recognize movies. So I'm always in the bag for movie theaters and going to see movies and seeing them in that medium, because even when you own the movie and can watch it on you have a big screen TV, you have a projector, it just doesn't imitate what it feels to be in a movie theater. So that's kind of how I feel about that. And my page finally loaded, so now I can tell you the Star Wars statement about the director of Star Wars Episode 9. So it says that Lucasfilm and Colin Trevorrow have mutually chosen to part ways on Star Wars Episode 9. Colin has been a wonderful collaborator throughout the development process. We have all come to the conclusion that our vision for the projects differ. We wish Colin the best, and we'll be sharing more information about the film soon. Which is a very similar statement to what they said about the Han Solo film. I guess the one plus thing about this is that they're announcing it now while the show is very much in pre-production, and not when the movie is 80% complete and they just had a few tie-ups to bring in Ron Howard to fill it in. So I know they're going to have to be announcing a director soon, and I don't know if I've heard a lot that I think the best thing would be for J.J. Abrams to come back to close out the production of that trilogy that he started very much as a hand in. Other people I've seen report that they want George Lucas to come back to close out this Skywalker saga, as it's being called in some places. So we'll kind of have to see when they report soon. I know with Star Wars Episode 8 coming out the end of this year, they're going to want to release that news soon before that movie hits, because if they're going to want to keep their 2019 release date, they have to do a lot of work now. So I'll definitely be keeping an eye on that, and we'll see how that shakes out.
Listen to the Voice of Survival podcast every other Friday, right here on the Journey into Comics Network. JourneyIntoComics.com.
Thanks for waiting patiently as I dealt with my fun internet issues. So, going back to Suicide Squad 2, the director they found who will write and direct is Gavin O'Connor, who, for those of you who don't know, wrote and directed the movie The Accountant, starring Ben Affleck, who we know plays Batman in the DCEU. Which he's also doing a sequel to The Accountant, which I'm very excited for. The Accountant was a fantastic movie, and if he can bring some of that script work and the action to Suicide Squad 2, sorry, that's kind of a mouthful, I'm all for it. I remember a while back they talked about that they were trying to court Mel Gibson to direct that movie, which seems like a far-fetched idea, but I think having Gavin O'Connor in, I think it'll maybe right the wrongs people had with the first Suicide Squad, and maybe leaves on an uptick that I think the DCU is trending in with the success of Wonder Woman and with the rework that Joss Whedon is doing to the Justice League movie. So I think we'll have to see what Justice League brings to the table as we go forward. But I know they're Warner Brothers has a lot of moving pieces. They try and get their movie verse off the ground in whatever way it's going to work out. One thing I also want to bring up is that on every show I've touched on this Netflix Disney deal that's been going on, where Disney is creating their own online streaming service, where they were going to take all of their content off Netflix and put it on that streaming service, which included all the Disney animated films, the Pixar products, the Star Wars films, and the Marvel films. And then on my episode 2, according to some report, they said that the Star Wars and Marvel was going to stay behind. Well, now it's been official that they are taking all of their products with them. The only thing staying behind will be the Marvel Netflix shows, which were developed on Netflix. They're not going anywhere, and it makes the most sense. If Disney's going to start this online streaming service, they want to have everything they can to entice people to jump, which seems like with everyone trying to create their own online streaming service, there's no people just going to cut the cord altogether. If they're satisfied with the price of the cable companies, they're not going to put up with 10 networks that they like, all charging them $7.99 or $9.99 or whatever the cost is for their own product. A couple other news came out this week. The HBO show Veep, starring Julia Louis-Dreyfus, has announced that the next season will be their last. It's been a great show. It's been a little Seinfeld-esque, but it's political, and it's like if House of Cards was a comedy. So it's been a very good show, and I encourage everyone to watch that. Some other news that came out was that Mario, a character that's been around since Nintendo's been around, is no longer a plumber. A couple articles have come out that in recent descriptions for the character, it says that he was a plumber. So he is no longer a plumber, and seeing that he plays tennis and does all this stuff, he seems like he's happily in retirement. So now we have a Mario that's no longer a plumber. So we'll see what more develops with that. It also came out. There's a rumor right now. Sorry, my cat is attacking me again. I guess she doesn't like when I film in the living room. So another thing that came out is that James Bond, due to some script issues, that James Bond come out that the reason he comes back to being Bond is that his wife is killed or dies or is murdered. I don't know all the details yet. It's still kind of in the rumor stages. But it seems that that's what leads James Bond to come back to being an agent. So that's a couple bits of big news. Another thing that I saw that was kind of exciting, one of the recent film festivals had Christian Bale there. I don't know what the movie was for that he was there, but you see a very different Christian Bale. He's put on a substantial amount of weight. He has bleach blonde eyebrows and has short hair. And for those of you who have seen a lot of Christian Bale's work, he's flip-flopped his weight dramatically in his film career. I know he's put on a ton of muscle when he played Batman. He was lean and muscular when he was in American Psycho. He put on a lot of weight and wore a toupee to make him look bald in American Hustle. And now he's put on some weight. He's dyed his eyebrows because he's going to be playing George W. Bush's Vice President Dick Cheney in this biopic written and directed by Adam McKay, who famous Will Ferrell collaborator, and has recently did films like The Big Short that all starred Christian Bale. So I think this is going to be something that I'm curious to see. I know I really enjoyed Oliver Stone's George W. Bush biopic debut. So if it's anything like that, I'm definitely all in for it. And I think with that, and with the CAD and my internet issues, I think that'll do it for my episode 3. So I want to again thank you all for listening. This show is something I look forward to doing every other week, and I plan it out. I'm thinking about it in my head as it goes on. So again, thank you for listening. Thank you to all my other shows on the network. Thank you again to Nate and Brandon for helping get this network off the ground. If you haven't listened to other shows on the network, I encourage you to do so. They're all great in their own ways. They all offer a different taste, a different topic. So Get a listen. If you've come here listening to me, please go on to continue to listen to the other shows along the network. I guess with that for this week, I'm Andrew Puhr. This is the Puhr Report, and have a great night.